We are the nerds. We are the nerds of the apocalypse.
How's everybody doing today? Good. So CityCon, yeah, this is first time I've been here in South Carolina. It's been great. The people that run this have been super nice to us. There's three of us out there. One of my buddies, Mike Toth, he worked on a lot of Disney stuff as well as stuff I worked on in Filmation. And Full Ortiz worked on a lot of Simpsons stuff and also did some of the Hanna-Barbera stuff that I started on back in 1978. So what I want to do is take you kind of through how I got in the business, which is kind of a strange way, and then take you through how we did a cartoon step by step. We had to use this thing called a pencil, and we drew on stuff called paper. It was really interesting back then. And nowadays, of course, everything's done in a computer. And the reason we've got a picture of a bus up there is because this is what I was doing in 1975 when I first got one of my first jobs. I was a bus driver in Los Angeles, and my route took me up across the San Fernando Valley into the Hollywood Hills and then down into Hollywood. And along that route was Hanna-Barbera Studios. So I used to go and look at that place every day thinking, boy, I sure wish I could go and tour the place, because I grew up with Yogi Bear and Huckleberry Hound and all those great early Hanna-Barbera cartoons. But first I want to kind of take you through what got me drawing. And I was about 8 years old when a company called Marvel Comics started in 1960. And this is one of the main dudes that really got me interested in drawing, because his work was better than everybody else's that had ever worked in the industry before. This guy's name is Jack Kirby. Anybody not know who he is? Because he was, along with Stan Lee, the ones that created all the Marvel characters like Fantastic Four and Captain America, and the Avengers, and all those characters, Thor. And he was the artist, Stan Lee was the writer. And so I later on in life got to meet, I worked on a thing called Thumdar the Barbarian. Anybody hear that one? Well, I worked on that with Jack Kirby, and he was my big hero. So when I got to finally meet him, it was like, you could end my life right then, and it would have been fun. But Jack was a really super nice guy, and like I said, they call him Jack King Kirby for a reason. He was just amazing as an artist. The other guy that was a big influence was a guy named Stan Lee. And this is me with him back in about 1990 when he was only about 75 years old. And he's still around and kicking. We're doing a few shows with him in the near future. And so this is when I got to meet him, and we got a photo and 5 autographs for free. Now that's about $1,000 worth compared to what it used to be like. Now the real reason I put this slide in here was not just to show you Stan Lee, but was to prove that at one point I used to have brown hair. And I had quite a bit of it, but now it's suddenly gone gray. Now this is that Hanna-Barbera building I was talking about, and like I said, it was up in the middle of the Hollywood Hills, and later on in life they put, where all those little green panels are, they put actual pictures of characters on there, so it looked even more like a really cool building. And later on, this is what it looked like when I was working there. This is the building that they had just built in 1978 when I started. And there was a little bridge between the buildings, and that's where I met Jack Kirby. I was working one day on the Smurfs, and I looked out and I saw Jack Kirby walking across the bridge, and I didn't even realize he worked there. So I ran out real quick and pretended I had to go to the other side of the building so I could run into him. And introduced myself. He was a super nice guy. He gave me his address and phone number. Said, "Come on over to the house. My wife will make you lunch, food." And he was going to be this great. So it's always nice when your heroes are good people. Now this is Bill Hanna and Joe Barbera, and they were responsible for the Tom and Jerry's back in the 40s. That were the theater shorts. Incredible animation, really, really funny. And when the industry kind of went south because movies just weren't really showing the cartoons anymore, they came up with what's called a limited animation system, where a character could walk in and just stop, and then you wouldn't have to redraw his body over and over and over, and they would just have him talk. And that's what they used on the Flintstones and all of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons. What that did is it made it so it was inexpensive enough that you could do cartoons and sell it to the TV stations. And that's what created what was fondly known as Saturday morning cartoons. Bill was kind of the family man. Joe Barbera was a little bit of the womanizer, but together they were dynamite, and it was really a great combination. Now this is me my first day at the studio. The guy behind me, Pete Gullaroo, he was also hired the same day I was. And the story of how I became an animator is really weird because I was, as I said, a bus driver. And one of my days, on the day off, I was sitting down to eat lunch. And I had gone after the mail, and all this junk mail had come. And usually I just take the junk mail and I just throw it right in the trash can. For some reason, I threw this on the kitchen table. And as I was sitting eating lunch, I noticed there was a little pamphlet there from one of the local colleges. So I just started thumbing through it as I was eating. And there was a class being taught in comic books, and I was a big comic book fan. And the teacher was a guy named Don Rico, who had drawn Captain America and the old Daredevil that was red and black back in the 50s. So I kind of wanted to take the class, A, because I was such a comic book fan, and I liked to draw, and B, was to be able to meet this guy who actually worked in the comic book industry. So I took the class, and the first night he said, okay, next week I want you to bring in your portfolio. So I brought in my portfolio that had all these pictures of Fantastic Four and Dr. Doom and all the different Marvel characters. And after the class, he kind of motioned for me to come up to the front while everybody else was filing out. And he said, I'd like to talk to you. And I said, okay, what about? And he goes, well, I work as a storyboard artist at Hanna-Barbera. And we're doing a show called Challenge of the Super Friends, which is basically all just superheroes, and I really like the way you draw superheroes. And we have a lot of people at Hanna-Barbera that can draw Fred and Barney and Scooby-Doo, but they're not really good with a figure. And would you be interested if I was to recommend you to this class that they have that teaches basic animation? And I said, well, thank you very much, but I'd rather be a bus driver the rest of my life. No, so of course I said, yeah, oh man, that would be awesome. So I got into the class, and lo and behold, 3 weeks later they hired me. And I didn't know what I was doing, so I told the director, I said, look, I've only done one in-between in the class, and I really don't know how to do this. And although I'm really flattered that you're hiring me, I don't want to give up my bus driving job because it pays really well and I've got benefits for something that I might just crash and burn doing. So he said, look, we like the way you draw. We're going to sit you with an animator. You'll be his assistant, and he will train you in what you have to do. And the first scene that I did was a Fred Flintstone jumping all around Dino because he inherited all his money. And, I did a pretty good job of it, but it was the first thing I'd ever done. And I didn't realize that we were supposed to take the animator's drawings and do what they call clean them up and put them on model. And that means that he kind of sketched out Fred, and as I was doing this, I said, boy, this kind of looks like Fred, but it kind of doesn't look like Fred. But I didn't want to mess with the animator's drawings, because I thought he was the god that I was supposed to worship. And so he said, well, yeah, you're supposed to make Fred look like Fred. And I said, oh, I didn't know. I didn't want to mess with your drawings. He said, well, luckily he's jumping all around the place, so you really can't see him that closely, so we'll let that slide. But really, next time, when you see something that doesn't look right, you have to fix it. Okay, I didn't understand. And so that was kind of my big introduction into the business. And of course, nobody ever got a job like I did. People went to school for years to learn how to do this stuff. And here I am, I just dropped into it accidentally. So I was really, really blessed. And thank goodness I didn't throw that stuff in garbage. I threw it on my kitchen table. Otherwise, I'd probably be retired from being a bus driver. Now, what happened at Hanna-Barbera was in 1982-83, there was a strike because the union, in all their great wisdom, decided that we should get paid more money. And I was of the mind that we were getting paid really well as it was, and they were threatening to send the work overseas because it was costing so much to do the shows in the United States. So I said, let's just get it so that we have a longer work year and not worry about how much money we're making an hour because we were doing fine. Well, they went on strike anyway. We signed a contract, but they signed a short contract for only 2 years. And when that contract came up, they shipped all the work overseas. So we basically had no work at all. you know, even if you were making $50 an hour, the way I do math, if there are 0 hours, you don't make any money. And we were fine at those. I think at the time it was about $20 an hour, which back in 1978 was just like a fortune. So I had heard that this company called Filmation Studios, and that's what you see here on the picture here. This is Lou Scheimer, he was the head of the studio. Hal Sutherland was the director, and Norm Prescott was the guy who kind of did the money deals and made the deals with the networks. Well, Lou Scheimer had been quoted as saying that he would never send to work overseas. He said, I am an American, this is an American business, we're keeping the work right here no matter what we have to do. So when I heard that, I left Hanna-Barbera and I went over to work in Filmation. And a lot of my friends thought I was nuts. And I said, you know, if they're going to send the work overseas, no, they're not. No, they're not. Well, they did. And we went from 8 animation studios down to 1 in 3 years. So Filmation was the only studio left if you were working in the United States. Now, the way Filmation got started is kind of a cool story. Lou had been doing like the afternoon specials or maybe a night special, you know, just every now and then. And he just had a bunch of his friends, and they all worked at home. And when he got a project, they would all work at home, bring the stuff in, and then they, you know, film it on camera, and that's how they put together the program. Well, CBS had seen that they were doing a really nice job, so CBS called them up and said, would you be interested in doing something called The Adventures of Superman? It was going to be the first Superman cartoon on TV. This is like the late 60s, early 70s. And Lou said, yes, we'd love to do that. We're looking for something that we can, you know, really build a studio and get some regular work. And so CBS says, okay, well, we're coming out, we're in New York, we're going to fly out to California, and we want to see your studio. Big problem, that in a studio. So he went out and rented this big building, got a bunch of animation desks and put it in the building, got all of his friends together, even people that had never drawn before, and had them sit at these desks, gave them drawings that they had done for these other shows, and they sat there and pretended they were working. So when CBS showed up, he said, okay, right now we're in the middle of a project and it's crunch time, so we can't spend any time talking to the animators. But we'll run you through the studio and you'll see that they really work hard working bunch, and it's going to be great. So CBS went through, they were impressed how everybody never even looked up. I mean, they were just and so CBS said, okay, we like your program, we're gonna give you the Superman show. And I'm sure, you know, Lou closed the door and just kind of wiped his brow and said, thank goodness that worked. You can imagine that because people would Google the Filmation Studios and there's nothing there. Get anything locked. But that's how Filmation got started, and it ended up being, you know, the only place to work for about 10 years. And sadly, Lou, about a year and a half ago, passed away. I was at a show in Nashville, and I got an email from a friend of mine that was supposed to have dinner with him on his birthday. And he passed away the day before his birthday. So she called me and said, you know, so I added this picture just as a homage, because people don't know who Lou Scheimer is. And I'll tell you, Lou Scheimer, he's Walt Disney. I mean, this is a guy that created a whole business and kept it in the United States, and kept us working for another 10 years until finally he was, Westinghouse owned Filmation Studios, and they were struggling and they needed a cash influx. So they put Filmation up for sale, and a company called L'Oreal, the makeup company, decided they wanted to buy it, and Lou made sure that they were going to keep the studio open before they would sell. And they lied to him. And the day they bought it, they closed the studio. And that was it. That was the last we had any work here in the US as far as regular serial TV. And Lou was completely ticked off that they did this to him. And he tried to put in a last minute bid to buy the company back. And Westinghouse didn't want anything to do with it. So it was really very sad for him because he was just such a great boss. Now this is the building that he bought back in the early 60s. A really unique looking building. It wasn't made for animation like the Hanna-Barbera studios. It was actually built for animation. This was just a building that they had to figure out where to put the camera department and everything else. But the cool thing about it is they had this upstairs and a downstairs lobby. You would go in here and it had kind of like a Brady Bunch staircase with those little blocks of rock going up. And you could see the second floor because it just was a railing over it. So you could see people up there moving around. One morning, about 3 o'clock in the morning, Lou Scheimer gets a phone call from the police saying that somebody had broken into the studio. The alarms were on. So he raced down there and opened up the doors for the police. And while he was looking for the lights, the police saw somebody naked running up on the second story up there. So they pull out their guns and they're yelling at this guy to freeze. And so Lou finally flips the lights on. And it's a giant cutout of Tarzan. And the reason they thought he was running is because when the air conditioner came on, it made this sound that sounded like hamsters were like running through the... So, number one, he wasn't naked, he had a loincloth on. And he wasn't running, so they almost killed Tarzan that day. But we thought, when we heard that the next day, we thought, what a, how could this possibly have happened? But yet it did. Now this is a little later on, this is the same building, but now we had taken across the building across the street over as well. And you can see there were tons of people working here, and they had changed the logo to the logo that you saw on the E-Man show. But we had gotten so big that now there was another studio about 8 miles away that did the ISIS and Shazam live action shows, I think it was Space Ark, some of those other things. And it was just really difficult to move things back and forth between the studios because we didn't have emails, we didn't have all that stuff that you could do today. So we had to have physical, runners that would take the drawings from one place to the other, and they were constantly going everywhere. So they decided they would finally consolidate under one big building and buy a brand new building. Now this is moving day. This is the old building, and this is moving day. And the nice thing about this building was that each guy had a door on his office, and you usually sat 2 or 3 in a room. But we butted up, like the guy that's sitting next to me out there. That's where we met each other. It was in this very back door back here. That was our room, and we've been friends ever since. And it was nice because you could close the door, play your music as loud as you want, you weren't bothering everybody else. And back in those days, I'm a non-smoker, and there were smokers in the building, so they'd walk down the hallway puffing away, and it would just come wafting into your room. And so this way we could close that out. And the negative of the new building was that we were now going to be in cubicles. And so I had a guy right there facing this way, smoking and blowing the smoke right into my face. So it was pretty bad. And but this was a beautiful building, and they really made a good effort at making this really, really like an animation studio. And I wish it had stayed open longer than it did. We had about 5 or 6 years in here before they finally closed. But here's what the cubicles looked like. And one day we just got tired of the cigarette smoke just wafting in, because we kept asking, please, just at least put them in the other side of the building so we didn't have to deal with that, face to face. And so we decided to take it upon ourselves, and Mike Toth, the guy that's out there, he bought a bunch of this plastic that we could hang through the ceiling. It had kind of high ceilings, and we hung it between the 2 desks, so that way they'd exhale and it would just come right back in. So that worked really good for a couple days until the supervisor came in and said, okay guys, this plastic is a fire hazard. And I said, what? I said, to me the fire hazard is that they're lighting a cigarette on fire. That's the hazard. So they made us take it down, but it did finally spur. We sent a note to Lou Scheimer with all of us signing it, and they built another part of the studio, blocked it off so that there was a smoking section. And then the only time you had to go in there was if you had to talk to one of the other guys, and then it was like you put on your gas mask and go in. But it still was a terrific place to work. We really had a lot of fun. Now I'd like to take you through how we did a cartoon in the good old days. The one question I always get asked is, what came first, the toys or the cartoon? And this was the toys. Mattel had come up with all these toys, and they met with Filmation and said, we'd like to do a TV series. And so the script writers all got together with Mattel, and they kind of hammered out the whole storyline that you saw, because they really had no idea what to do with it except to sell the toys. So this was perfect for us. And So, I mean, we ended up going from a normal season of something like Scooby-Doo was 13 episodes per year because it was only on Saturdays. Well, this was going to be the very first show that was going to be shown Monday through Friday, so we're going to have 5 episodes to do a week. So suddenly, instead of 13 episodes, we have 65 episodes to do in a year. Well, if you figure that out, that's more than 1 week. And this was a very complicated show to do because of all the detail. So, I mean, really, it's pretty amazing that we did 130 episodes in 2 years. So that's 10 years worth of another show that we did in 2 years. So once they got the idea of what they wanted to do, then once a script is made, it goes to a bunch of different places. One of the places it goes is the recording studio, where they record the voices. Because as an animator, I'm kind of an actor with a pencil. I have to make the character move and do whatever is necessary for the scene. But part of that is knowing what the people are saying, because if they're saying, look out, if I see they say look out, that doesn't tell me anything. So they gave me this really cool thing called a cassette tape. And it had the whole soundtrack. So I could sit and listen, and I would play it over and over. And if somebody said, look out, then we would know, do that, maybe have the point or whatever. And that gave you really good ideas on the inflections on what you should draw as the animation. It also go over to the storyboard department. That's what my teacher did. He basically took that script and turned it into like a comic book. But it was a comic book that had camera movements in it. So it was like, you'd see He-Man standing here saying, I have the power. And then the camera would slide over and show his sword shooting those effects off. And then you'd cut and go to Cringer shaking in the corner. And then being hit by all those effects and turning into Battle Cat. And so they went through the entire episode and made a comic book of it. So we knew each scene, how long it was, and what drawings needed to be done, what view they were, and how large they were to be drawn. So now, once it goes to the storyboard department, they take each one of those little storyboard panels and they blow it up to the size that we worked out, which is about like this. And this was called a layout because they laid out the scene as it was. The background would be behind them, except in this case, it's obvious that they're either standing behind a table or something, because the background is the very back. So you would have to draw the character and just stop them when they got to that table, so it would look like they're standing behind the table. And we also had to draw behind this old TV line, because that's what TVs used to look like. And we had to make sure we drew a couple inches past that, because if it ever went on the big screen, it's a much wider screen, so you don't want Battle Cat's rear end to just disappear when it goes to the movie theaters. Then it also goes over to what's called the model sheet department, and this guy Alex Toth, he was one of the best at it. He took really, really complicated characters and boiled them down to very few lines, because it depends on how fast you get the scene done, how much what they call pencil mileage there is. If you've got to draw all over the place, it takes you twice as long if you've just got a couple of nice, quick lines. And I mean, look how nice this Batman is, and yet there's very, very little there outside of the necessary lines. So it made the work go faster, it made it easier, and it made it easier to keep the 60 animators all drawing things looking the same. Otherwise, it could all look different every time you change scenes. It would look different if a different animator handled it. But since we had all the different angles of the characters, we knew exactly what they looked like from all angles. Everybody that was an artist could draw that. And here's the Wonder Woman version of the model sheet. Then it would come over to us in the animation department, and we would get that layout, and we would look at that, and we could use that little drawing or not, but it had to hook up with whatever the prior scene is. So if the scene was of He-Man holding a sword up, when it cut, you had to be sure that your first drawing was him having the sword up in the same position. Otherwise, it would look funny if you cut scenes and all of a sudden the sword's down. Now we drew in a blue pencil, and we just would sketch things in, and then leave it to the assistant animator to put a lot of the details in, because we were responsible for how the character moved, not really what the final thing was. And that's what I was telling you about Fred, where I goofed that thing up pretty good. And they do it in blue pencil, because when the assistant does it in black, when you Xerox this, the blue does not show up. So it's kind of like non-photo blue, like they always warn you if you're going to copy something, not to use blue. And then we put a chart right down here, and that tells the assistant animator where the in-betweens go. So I would draw number 34X and number 30 in this example, and then tell the assistants they would do number 32 first, putting it right in between these two. And then the same thing with these here. So eventually you have a full scene that would move really smoothly. These are called exposure sheets, and this is what every one of these lines is a cell. So you see all these numbers down the middle, that's all a cell. And this is basically, let's see, 1, 2, that's about 3 seconds worth. And so you have all these drawings here that the animator would get to look at, that the director would put in, if he had certain things that he wanted to see. When you learn how to direct a cartoon, it's basically like doing a regular movie, but instead of yelling at the actors with a megaphone, you were yelling at the animators by telling them what to draw in that column there. And then if you wanted them to draw a certain pose, you just put a little thumbnail there. For the most part on He-Man, we had to really stick to whatever the storyboard was because, 65 episodes a year, we were just really, really busy. And this is kind of the close-up of that same thing, and you can see there's dialogue. This is where the dialogue goes. Somebody's job was to actually put it out on each cell phonetically, so we could know exactly what mouth to put. Like right here, he's saying we, so that's like a ooh mouth, which is an F mouth. And then a C mouth is open a little bit. And it's basically A mouth is closed, B, C, D, and then we say ooh, it's E and F. And so you would expose that here, and that way when you get to this drawing here, you know that, okay, he's saying an A, so you have to have his mouth closed. And it worked really good, and you could really see the dialogue look like they were saying what they were saying on the screen. They'd also give us a walk cycle, and this would give us a chance to know if the hat's bobbing up and down or not, and that way every animator that did this character walking would know how he's walking. This is a little character named Corn-Fed in a show called Duckman. Anybody ever see Duckman? That was a kind of your mom didn't like to watch that show. It was the guy George Costanza from Seinfeld, the voice of Duckman. A little bit rough around the edges, but it was a pretty funny show. I directed some episodes of that. Then once the animation is Xeroxed onto a cell, they flip the cell around and they paint the back end of it with vinyl cell paint. And they start with the smaller things like the eyes and the teeth, and then once that dries, then they can go back and do the face and all the rest of it. So that was one of the most costly parts of an animation feature, is you had about 150 women, normally women, that would paint the cells. Nowadays, it's done by computer. You probably need 15 people to do that. Because it's so much faster, you don't have to wait for paint dry, and if you make a mistake, you just right-click and delete it. And the way they kept it straight, what color everybody was, is they gave you this called a markup sheet, and it had all the different, like SFL1 was Fred's flesh tone. Where it got tricky is because of limited animation, there were like 6 or 7 cells that could be used on top of one another, and if there was a cell underneath, whatever color it was painted would get a little darker with each cell that you put on top of it. So if you had Fred's body on the bottom layer, that would be SFL1. But if his, maybe his arm is going to move and it would be on the top cell, they would have to paint that SFL6 so that it would match the same color down below. It's a little bit darker color. And that's why if you ever saw a cartoon where all of a sudden the arm is the wrong color, slightly different shade of purple or whatever for a sleeve, they painted it at the wrong level of color. So doing that, imagine every single one of these with 6 different, shades of that color. Imagine what it was like doing this show. It's a nightmare. But, thankfully they did a really great job on it, and very few mistakes. Because if you made a mistake, we were so busy, you just couldn't go back and re-Xerox everything and repaint it. It was just too costly. And more than costly, it was just we didn't have the time. This is what the back of the cell looks like. It doesn't matter once you get the first initial white stuff that matches in the eyes, because on the other side, that's where all the dark line is. So as long as you color between the lines, it's going to look fine when you look at the front. And this is kind of an example. You can kind of see a little bit of the blue pencil left underneath that, then the pencil from the assistant animator, and then the ink and paint version there. These are the folders that every single scene is put in. So there were probably about 300 scenes per show. So each one of the scenes had this, and when we went in to pick up work, they give us maybe 20 or 25 of these, and that was our work for the week. And as it goes down the line, from layout to assistant layout to director to animator to assistant animator, you would sign your name. So that way, when they get down here to camera, if there's a mistake made, they know who to go back and yell at and have fix it. And but it was a great system, and it kept everything together in one folder. So, and every now and then you'd have to use part of that drawing from that scene for your first drawing of the next scene. So you'd know to go and you could look for this folder and use that same drawing. Now here's the system with the ink and paint. Like I said, there's no layers anymore. You can do 100 cell layers, and it doesn't make any difference now. The backgrounds in Filmation, they had some really great background painters, and of course, if you watch He-Man, I just loved all the Skeletor with the bones everywhere, and it's just such good science fiction backgrounds. And it started out looking like this. They would blue sketch something out, kind of put the shadows in there so the painter would know, where the sun is, and they would transfer this onto a piece of really thick board. It was acrylics or watercolor or whatever to paint it. And when they got done painting it, it would end up looking a bit like this. All right, not exactly like this. This is a Flintstone one, and of course, the cool thing about the Flintstones was it was designed so perfect for those characters. I mean, the two designs work so well together. And see this up here, they put this little texture on there by using a little sponge and dipping it in the paint, and then just dabbing it on there, and it made it look like rock instead of just vinyl paint, which was just kind of a flat color. So it really worked great for these Flintstone episodes. Then it goes over to the camera department, and everything was laid down flat. The cells are put on top of the background, and then each cell is shot 2 times. Then you pull everything up, move the little background. If you have to move it 1/8 of an inch if something's moving, the cameraman would move it 1/8 of an inch, put the next cell down, take that twice. So it's a very long process to get the camera work done. But they have these 45-degree lights on here because when you have 8 layers of cells, the very top one would throw a little bit of a shadow from whatever was painted on it down to the one down below. So that would take the shadow out by putting that 45. And this is all stuff that they learned over time. The early cartoons, you can actually see that shadow kind of animating all over the place. This is what they looked like back in the 40s, and this is also what they looked like in the 90s up until we stopped using them. It was a really great, super well-made camera. And there he is putting the background down. This is the little lever that you move the background. You can imagine it, when they're running in the center and the background's going by, and you keep seeing the same things go by. Imagine moving that 1/8 of an inch each time, and you've seen it go by 3 or 4 times. I mean, that took a long time. My buddy out there, Phil, was doing one of the layout designs for the background, and he made the mistake, and it was a great story that he told me. He said he did this beautiful background, and he put the sun over here. Well, every time it went by, there was another sun. So it was like, 20 suns go by, and the guy just said, no, never put the sun in the background. So that was something they had to go and repaint. Then it goes over to the editing department, where in the old days they would take the film, splice it, and put it back together. And nowadays, just right-click, delete, just delete whatever part it is. There's no more film. So it's not quite as much fun. I have a friend that's an editor, and they like to actually, put the film on the reels and all that. And now it's just in the computer. Okay, so then you just add the voice track and soundtrack and kind of match it up with wherever they have them on the film, and you've got an episode of He-Man. And this isn't the best part. I mean, you've seen a lot of really good steps, but this to us was the best part of the whole show. Yeah, finally getting credit. So it was really great. And Filmation was one of the few studios that they put the words on the screen and they let it sit there for a while instead of scrolling it. And nowadays you see this because it's in the rules that they have to show the credits, even rerunning it for the 30 millionth time. But now they just run them so fast, they make it really small so you can't see anything anyway. So, But Lou was one of those guys that he said, hey, you guys worked on this stuff. You should get credit for this. So they put us in here. Now, I don't know if anybody's seen this show, Rover Dangerfield. I worked on this show. This had the very first 3D scene in it. The opening sequence was done in the computer, and I did all the 2D animation that was within that. And so that was really cool to see the very first thing that was 3D. It blew our minds. We couldn't believe that you could actually see things moving. And now it's just old hat. Everybody's used to that. I was also a director on King of the Hill.
Oh,
this show. I directed one of the episodes was where Bobby gets caught smoking in the first season.
really?
So here I am with the smoking again. What is this? It's following me everywhere. But really good show. And when I got this in the mail to direct, I had never, it wasn't on the air yet. And I saw the pictures and I said, oh my gosh, this is like Beavis and Butthead. Because it's not drawn very well. And one of the guys that designed some of the characters, he said that when they hired animators, by the way, this is a joke, when they hired the animators, they would slam their hand in the car door so they couldn't draw anymore. And then that way they could animate on the show. Worked on some things called Happily Ever After Fairy Tales for HBO. These were like different takes on the old fairy tales. Like there was one where Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and Goldilocks had like dreadlocks. It was all Jamaican music. And they had a Pinocchio, where Will Smith was the voice of Pinocchio, and Pinocchio was a black puppet. And instead of the blue fairy coming down beautifully, it was a blues fairy, this big fat guy with a sax. And all the music was blues music. And the fun thing for me as a director was that whoever was the storyboard artist never did enough. So it has to be a certain length. So every show was a little bit short, so I got to make up story and put it into the show myself. So I got to add some jokes, and it made it extra fun. Nowadays, I live in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm a drummer in our worship band at church. The reason I became a drummer was back in 1964. These guys from England came over, called the Beatles. And I just loved the Beatles, but I still wasn't really that interested in drumming until the girl that I had a crush on fell in love with Ringo. And I said, I'm going to learn the drums and steal her heart away from Ringo. Didn't work, but at least I can play the drums. So anyway, right now I think we've still got plenty of time left. Let's see here. And we've got about 10 minutes left. So anybody have any questions about anything we've talked about or anything at all? Just raise your hand. And Velma.
How many cells might take up an entire episode?
Boy, you'd have to pick up a calculator and figure that one out. It was 12 cells per second. And then figuring, it probably was like 25 minutes or something for that. So, pull out get your phones out. But it's a lot of cells. And when people come to have us autograph them, it's very rare that I ever get one that I actually worked on. One show, somebody came walking up and handed me one. I go, oh my gosh, that is my scene. And so I was hoping he was going to give me the cell. No such luck, no such luck. So I signed it for him, and then I decided I was going to go out and look and see if I could find anything on eBay.
Oh, is it?
I found 4 cells from that same sequence. So I bought those. I just bought them right now. So I've got quite a few cells at home now that I've been trying to find stuff that I've worked on. Any other questions?
Yeah, I've always noticed it in the old styles of cartoons and movies.
You mean the good styles, not the old styles?
Yeah,
Okay, that's
you
good.
know what I mean though, right?
Yeah.
About how there was always one part where everything else was in place, but whenever the character in the scene actually used to go like pull a book off his shelf,
Right.
that was the one thing that wasn't like actually in the
Right, and that's what I was talking about earlier, where they would paint it maybe the wrong color. And that way you knew that whatever that thing was, it was going to open up a door or something like that.
Yeah, I just saw it on there. That's what led me to asking you the question of seeing calibration.
Exactly. So anything else? Yeah.
What was the hardest guy to draw?
The hardest guy to draw. Well, it's amazing because the hardest guy to draw was a woman. Yeah, any of the women, if you don't get them looking really pretty, they look really bad. and with She-Ra, I mean, the whole show was women. So luckily for us, what they did, because we were so busy with that show, like I said, in 1 week we had to get done, that they had 3 assistant animators that were really, really good at drawing pretty women. So they told the animators, don't bother drawing the face, just put a little circle and show where they're looking, and the assistant will put the face in there. So that saves my butt, because it would take twice as long to get drawings done of women. And because if you draw a guy kind of ugly, well, he's just kind of a guy. But the women, you got to make them look good. So, but good question. That's a real good question. All right, yeah, back there.
Well, it would be about 18,000 cells.
There you go, 18,000 cells.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How much would you recommend that somebody try to learn how to animate?
Learn how to animate. Well, I always tell people when they say, my kid wants to learn to be an animator, what school do I send them to? And I say, go to law school. Because there's no work here in the U.S. Everything is sent overseas. So if you want to live in the Philippines or Vietnam, you can move over there. I was offered a job, but I would have to move over there, and I didn't want to move there. So I ended up moving to Seattle and worked at Microsoft for about 5 years and learned how to do computer animation. And then it was when they first started doing computer animation. So I went around from different studios and kind of trained the young guys who knew how to do the computer but didn't know how to animate things. And so that's kind of how I survived, because without any work, it would have been really tough. I didn't want to go back and be a bus driver again. So, all right, anything else? Wow, well informed crowd. Okay, yeah.
How do you feel about the cartoons today and how animation has changed? Because I grew up on Hanna-Barbera,
Yeah.
and I could watch that over and over, still to
Sure.
this day. And now I see the cartoons and the animation that we have, and it's like, I just don't know.
Well, how do I feel about the cartoons of today? Next question, please. Yeah, no, I agree with 100%. It's just not the same. You aren't hand drawing things anymore, and it was terrible because we had some great shows like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Thundercats. I would have loved to have worked on that, but they sent the work overseas, so I didn't get a chance to work on some really great things. Nowadays, I will admit I kind of like SpongeBob. I'm sorry, but I kind of do. It's pretty funny. Mainly because my grandkids were watching it, and I thought, man, that's pretty clever, but it's still pretty ugly. But there aren't too many shows that I really like nowadays, especially stuff like Family Guy is really funny, but boy, I would sit down with my kids to watch it. It's just a little too edgy for them. I saw something over here. Yeah.
What was your favorite character to draw?
My favorite character to draw, well, it was a TV show called Thundar the Barbarian. And it was a little bit more for older kids. The world had ended because a comet came by and wiped out the atmosphere. It broke the moon in 2. So you had this cool moon up there in 2 pieces. And it was basically the barbarians versus the sorcerers. And it was really a good show. And so that was my favorite thing to work on. But as far as character to draw, I think my favorite character to draw, there's 2 of them. Roger and Jessica Rabbit. We had to work on that. It's called Tummy Trouble. It was a little short that played, if you watched Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, it was a 10-minute cartoon, maroon cartoon at the very beginning of that. So getting to work on Jessica and Roger was really great because we loved that movie, the original, Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And that's one of the ones that, boy, if I have a drawing of Jessica out there, it sells like that because the guys love Jessica Rabbit for some reason, or 2 reasons actually. Yeah, anybody else? Okay, yeah.
Did you do Looney Tunes too? Such as the classic Looney Tunes?
No, classic Looney Tunes, thank you, but I was not born yet. I guess I look pretty old up here, don't I? But I got to work on something called Tiny Toons. And they're tiny and they're toony, and they're kind of loony. But what was kind of fun is I got to work on sort of, Looney Tunes characters. And one of the other questions I get a lot of times is, what did you wish you'd work on that you didn't get a chance to? And for me, it was Pinky and the Brain. I was directing cartoons at the time, and I called up Warner Brothers because I knew a few people who worked there. And I said, look, I really want to direct a few episodes of Pinky and the Brain. And they said, you know, it's such a big show, they don't want to risk sending it out FedEx, because this was in the 80s, and FedEx was still really good, but they still weren't quite as good as they are today. And so I ended up working on something which ended up being really good. They said, would you like to work on a thing called Road Rovers? And it was a show done by one of the writers at Filmation that started his own, he worked with Warner Brothers and started his own idea. And it was the cutest show about these dogs from all around the world that were brought together to fight for justice. And there was one from Russia, a girl from Australia, and he had a trans dogrifier that would turn into part human, part dog. And the cute part was, they had like a submarine that looked like a dog. They had a helicopter that looked like a dog. And when they left their little lair, there was a doggy door that would open up to let them out. So everything was dog related. And when they finally captured the bad guy in one episode, the bad guy pulls out a ball and throws it, and they all run after the ball because they can't help themselves. But a really funny show. It's called Road Rovers. You ought to check it out. It just came on DVD. Yeah. Boy, I don't know if they're cats or what. Yeah, Animaniacs. I have no clue, but pretty funny. And it's really a good show. That's another one I wish I had worked on. That was really good. I got to work on the Tiny Toons, but I didn't get a chance to do Animaniacs. All right, I also got to work on Garfield. I don't know if anybody saw Garfield, Babes and Bullets. It was kind of a film noir. He was Sam Spade, like Spade the cat. You know, Spade cat. And Charlie Brown, I worked on some of the Charlie Brown specials. This is American Charlie Brown. And so let's see, we have time for like one more question. Velma, half question. Yeah.
Did hearing the voice acting, did they ever influence how the character was drawn?
Yeah, I mean, often. In fact, in films more often, because they finally got the idea of filming the people as they were doing the voices. So sometimes they would give some of their, and that's why you can see some of the characters, you go, wow, that looks like Tom Hanks or whatever, because it looks like the way he would act. But with us, it was just basically, we kind of knew, like when I worked on Rover Dangerfield, you know, we knew Rodney Dangerfield. You know, so it was always like, hey, I get no respect, you know? So we always knew how to draw him. But other characters we didn't really see, but it was the inflection of what they said, and you know, we get a picture of them and know that they're like real pretty and maybe, you know, really small. And so it really gave the animators a chance to come up with an idea, but yet still be true to the voice. So anyway, thanks so much, guys, and I just want to let you know that, you know, if not for you guys, this stuff would be dead. I mean, it's so amazing that 40 years later, I'm sitting in front of you guys talking about stuff I did so long ago. And I'm also a fan. I'm one of those guys that, boy, I would have killed to have conventions back in the 60s, so I could have met Bob Clampett and Chuck Jones and some of the people who did the Looney Tunes. Or even, you know, I'm lucky I got to meet Hanna-Barbera, but they would have been on the list too, because their stuff was so influential. But in fact, there's a cartoon that really affected my life, and it was called Top Cat. Everybody see Top Cat? Well, my initials are TC, so that's what they call them all the time. So my email address is actually topcat@, you know. But if not for you guys, I wouldn't have had a job. So thank you very much for being such great fans, and in my retirement, I can come out and have so much fun. So come on out, we've got drawings, we've got prints, we'll autograph stuff for you. If you've got any DVDs, we can autograph those for you. And we're kind of right at the very back, on the back wall, right near the concession stands. So thank you very much for coming out today. Hope you had a good time.